From Orlando, Florida, it's theCUBE, covering Pentaho World 2017. Brought to you by Hitachi Vantara.
Welcome back to theCUBE's live coverage of Pentaho World, brought to you by Hitachi Vantara. My name is Rebecca Knight, I'm your host, along with my co-host, Dave Vellante. We're joined by Michael Weiss, he is the Senior Manager at NASDAQ, and Sheer Seiden, who is Analytics Manager at NASDAQ. Thanks so much for coming back to theCUBE, I should say.
Yes.
You're CUBE veterans now.
We are, well at least I am. This is his first year and this is his first time at Pentaho World, so excited to bring him along.
Okay, so you're a newbie, but you're a veteran.
Yeah.
So great. So tell us a little bit about what has changed since the last time you came on, which is 2015 back then.
So the biggest thing that's happened in the past 18 months is we've launched 7 new exchanges, integrated 7 new exchanges. We bought the ISE, the International Stock Exchange, which is 3 options markets. We just completed that integration in August. We've also bought the Canadian SHIEX, the Canadian exchange, which also had 3 equities markets, so we integrated them. And we went live with a dark pool offering for Goldman back in June. So now we operate a dark pool for Goldman Sachs, and we're looking to kind of expand that offering at this point.
So you're just getting bigger and bigger, and so tell our viewers a little bit how Pentaho fits into this.
So Pentaho is the engine that kind of does all our analytics behind the scenes at post-trade, right? So we do a lot of traditional ETL, we're doing batch processing in the back end. We're doing a little bit more with the Hadoop ecosystem, leveraging things like EMR, Spark, Presto, that type of stuff. And Pentaho kind of helps blend that stuff together a little bit. We use it for reporting. We do some of the BA. We're actually now looking to have the data Pentaho generates plug in a little bit of Tableau. So we're looking to expand it and really leverage that data in other ways at this point. Even doing some things more externally, doing more data offerings via Pentaho externally.
So I got to do a NASDAQ 101 from my 13-year-old. He came up to me the other day and said, Daddy, what's the NASDAQ index and how does it work? Give us a 20-second answer.
On the NASDAQ index?
Yeah, what's the NASDAQ index and how does it work?
Probably the wrong person to answer that one, but I mean, the NASDAQ index is generally just a blend of various stocks, right? So the S&P 500 is a blend of the top of different stocks. Much like that, the Qs are NASDAQ's equivalent of the S&P, right? So we use a different algorithm to determine the companies that make up that blend, but it's an index just like the S&P.
They're weighted by market cap, and
right,
that determines the number at the end, and it goes
Correct.
up and down based on what the stocks in that
right,
index.
and that's how most people know NASDAQ, right? They see the S&P went up by 5 points, the Dow went down by 3, and the NASDAQ went up by a point, right? But most people don't realize that NASDAQ also operates 27 exchanges worldwide, I think it is now. So probably a little bit more, maybe closer to 32. But
so you mentioned that you're doing a dark pool for Goldman.
Yes.
So that's interesting. We were talking off camera about HFT and kind of the old days, and dark pools were criticized at the time. Now Goldman was one of the ones that was shown to be honest and above board. But what does that mean? The dark pool for your business, and how does that all sort of tie in?
So, I mean, dark pools are isolated markets, right? So they don't necessarily interact with the NASDAQ exchange themselves. It's all done within the pool. You interact with only people trading on that pool. What NASDAQ has done is we took our technology and we now host it for Goldman. So we have INET's our trading system, so we gave them INET. We built all the surrounding solutions, how you manage symbols, how you manage membership, even the data. We curate their data into AWS. We do some Pentaho transformations for them. We do some analytics for them, and that's actually going to start expanding. But yeah, we provided them an entire solution, so now they don't have to manage their own dark pool. And now we're going to look to expand that to other potential clients.
So that's NASDAQ as a technology provider. It's very interesting. So I was saying earlier, the Hong Kong Stock Exchange is basically closing the facility where they house humans. Again, another example of machines replacing being humans. So they're joining, well, NASDAQ kind of, but NYSE, London Stock Exchange, Singapore, now Hong Kong, essentially electronic trading. So brings us to the sort of technology sort of underpinnings of NASDAQ. Sure, maybe you could talk a little bit about your role and paint a picture of the technology infrastructure.
Yeah, so I focus primarily on the financial side of corporate finance. So we leverage Pentaho to do a lot of the data integration, allow us to really answer our business questions. So previously it would take days to put basic reporting together. Now you've got it all automated, or we're working towards getting it mostly automated, and then just answer the questions that we need, and no longer use our gut to drive decisions. We're using hard data, and so that's helped us instrumentally in a lot of different places.
So talk more about the data pipeline, where the data is coming from, how you're blending it, and how you're bringing it through the pipeline and operationalizing it.
Yeah, so we've got a lot of different billing systems. So we integrate companies, and historically we've let them keep their billing systems. So just kind of bring it all together into our core ERP, seeing how, quantities and just getting the data and just figuring out on the basic side, how much do we make from a certain customer? What are we making from them, right? What happens in different scenarios if they consolidate or they default, right? So it's a lot, and some of the pipeline there is just blending it all together, normalizing the data, making sure it's all in the same format, and then putting it in a format where our executives or business managers can actually make decisions off of it.
Well, you're talking about the decision-making process, and you said it's no longer a gut. You're using data to drive your decisions to know which direction is the right direction. How big a change is that? And just culturally speaking, how has that changed? Yeah,
it's huge. It's making us more, at least on our side, making a lot more confident in the decisions we're making. We're no longer going in and saying, hey, this is probably how we should do it. It's no, the numbers are showing us that this is going to pay off, and we stick to it and look at the hard facts rather than what do we think is going to happen.
So talk a little bit about what you guys are seeing here. You're doing a lot of speaking here. we were joking earlier, you're kind of losing your voice a little bit. But so what you're telling your story, what kind of reactions you're getting? Maybe share with us the behind the scenes at the conference.
I think if you, at this conference, you've seen a lot of people kind of fall in line with similar ideas that we're trying to get to. Taking advantage more, instead of your traditional MPPs or your traditional relational databases, moving more towards this Hadoop ecosystem, leveraging Spark, Presto, Flume, all these various new technologies that have emerged over the past 2 to 5 years, right? And are now more viable than ever. They're easier to scale. Like if you look at your traditional MPPs, like we're a big Redshift user, but every time you scale it, there's a cost with that. And we don't necessarily need to maintain all that data all the time. So something in the Hadoop ecosystem now lets us maintain that data without all the necessary cost. So I see a lot more of that I did 2 years ago. A lot more people are following that trend. I think the other interesting trend I've seen this week is this idea of becoming more cloud agnostic. Where do you operate and how do you store your data should be irrelevant to the data processing. And I think it's going to be a tough nut to crack for any Pentaho or any vendor. But if you can figure out a way to either do some type of cloud parity where you have support across all your services, but you don't have to know which service you deploy to when you design your pipelines, I think that's going to be huge. I think we're a little ways from that, but I see that's been a common theme this week as well, both private and your big three cloud providers right now, your Googles, your Azures, and your AWS.
So when I ask you said cloud agnostic, which is great, it's good vision and aspiration, but the follow-up would be, am I correct, you don't see it as data location agnostic? Right? You want to bring the cloud model to your data versus try to force your data into a cloud, or not necessarily?
I think this is coming from a lot of it I think is being driven by not wanting to be vendor locked in, right? So they want to have the ability to, and I think this is an easier said than done, the ability to move your data to different cloud providers based on pricing or offerings, right? And right now, going from AWS to Google to Azure would be a very painful process. If you move petabytes of data across, it's not cost efficient, and by the time all the savings you want to realize by moving to maybe a Google in the future are not going to be realized because of all the effort it's going to take to get there.
We had CERN on earlier, and they were working on that problem, but
yeah, I mean it's not a trivial problem to solve. So, but if you can crack that, and you can then say, hey, I want to deploy, and even if I'm from a service offering, like we're operating in a dark pool for Goldman. We also have a market tech side where we sell our trading platform and various solutions to other exchanges worldwide. If we can come up with a way to be able to deploy to any cloud provider, even on an on-prem cloud, without having to do a bunch of customizations each time, I mean that'd be huge. It would revolutionize what we do, right? So we're as our own company kind of starting to look at that, and in talking with Pentaho, they're also, and Hitachi are starting to eye that as a potential way to go with abstractions and things like that. But it's going to take some time.
Were you guys here yesterday for the keynotes? Did you see some of the keynotes?
Saw some of the keynotes. Yes.
I mean, the big messaging, like every conference that you go to, is be the disruptor, or you're going to get disrupted. We talked earlier off camera. Trading volumes are down, so the way you traditionally made business or did business is changing, and made money is changing.
Right.
We talked earlier about you guys becoming a technology provider. I wonder if you could help us understand that a little bit from the standpoint of NASDAQ strategy. When we hear your CEOs talk, real visionary, technology-driven transformations.
Yeah, I think Adina's coming in is definitely looking at that as a trend, right? Like, our trading volumes are down. They've been going down. They've kind of stabilized a little bit, and we're still being able to make money in that space. But the problem is there's not a ton of growth. We acquire the IC, we acquire the Chi-X. We're buying market share at that point. So you increase revenue, but you also increase overhead in that way. And you can only do so many major acquisitions at a time, right? You can only do how many $1 billion acquisitions a year before you have to call it a day. And we can look at more strategic, smaller acquisitions for exchanges, but that doesn't necessarily bring you the transformation, the net revenue you're looking for. So what Adina has started to look at is how do we transform to more of a technology company? We're really good at operating exchanges. How do we take that? We already have MarketTech doing it, but how do we make that more scalable, not just to the financial sector, but to your other exchanges, your Ubers or your StubHubs of the world, right? How do you become a service provider or a platform as a service for these other companies to come in and use your tech? So we're looking at how do we rewrite our entire platform from trading to the back end to do things like, can we deploy to any cloud provider? Can we deploy on-prem? Can we be a little bit more technology agnostic, so to speak, and offer these as services and offer a bunch of microservices so that if a startup comes and wants to stand up an exchange, they can do it. They can leverage our services and build whatever other application they want on top of it. And I think that's a transformation we need to go through. I think it's a good vision, and I'm looking forward to executing it. It's going to be a couple of years before we see the fruits of that labor, but it's good. Adina's really doing a great job of coming in and really driving that innovation, and Brad Peterson as well, our CIO, has really been pushing this vision, and I think it's really going to work out for us, assuming we can execute.
Well, what's interesting about that, if I may, is financial services usually so secretive about their technology, right? But your business, you guys are becoming a technology provider. So you got to face the world and start marketing your capabilities now, and opening up about that. It's sort of an interesting change.
I think you'll see that starting to become more of a thing over the next year or two as we start actually looking to build out the platform and figure it out. We do market to on the MarketTech side. I mean, it's not a small business, but we're more strategic about who we market to, because we're still targeting your financial exchanges more internationally than in the U.S. But there's only so many of them. So now you got to start looking at rebranding, rebuilding, and rethinking how we think about exchanges in general, and not thinking of it just as a financial thing.
Well, that's what I wanted to get into, because you're talking about this rebranding and this rebuilding, this transformation to the backdrop within an industry that is changing rapidly, and we have the sort of the threat of legislative reform, perhaps some administrative reforms coming down all the time. So how do you manage that? I mean, those are a lot of pressures there. Are you constantly trying to push the envelope right up until when any changes take place, or what would you say, Sheer and Michael?
Yeah, probably, again, not the right person to ask about this, but no, we're definitely trying to stay on top of the cutting edge and innovation and the technologies out there that, whether it be blockchain or different types of technologies. I mean, we're definitely trying to make sure we're investing in them while maintaining our core business.
Right. It's trying to find that balance right now of when to make the next step in the technology food chain, and when to balance that with regulatory obligations. And if you look at it, going back to the idea of being able to launch marketplaces, I think what you're going to end up seeing over the coming years is your Ubers, your StubHubs, I think they're going to become more regulated at some level.
Right.
So and we're good at operating more regulated markets. So I think that's where we can kind of come in and play a role and help wade through those regulations a little bit more and help build software to be adhere to those regulations.
Since you brought up blockchain, right? Jamie Dimon craps all over blockchain or Bitcoin, and then clarifies his remarks saying, "Look, the technology underneath is here to stay." Yeah. Thoughts on blockchain? Obviously, financial services is looking at it very closely. Doing some really advanced stuff. What can you tell us?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no argument that it's definitely an innovation and a disruptive technology. I think that it's definitely in its early stages and across the board. So we're definitely, as we've said, we're investing in it where we can and trying to keep a close eye on it. We think that there's a lot of potential in a lot of different applications.
As the NASDAQ transforms its business, how does that affect the sort of back-end analytics activity and infrastructure?
Yeah, I mean, the data is just growing. I mean, that's the biggest challenge we have now. Data that used to be done in Excel is just no longer an option. So now, in order to get the insights that we used to get just from having a couple people doing Excel transformations, you need to now invest in the infrastructure